On today's LA Currents, we sit down with Enrique Zaldivar of LA Sanitation and Environment to discuss how LA San has adapted to the pandemic. We then talk all things masks and safety with LA's Medical Services Administrator, Joanne O'Brien. And we chat with Councilmember Mitch about dismantling controversial symbols and his coronavirus policy work for Los Angeles. Enrique Zaldivar was first appointed to helm LA Sanitation and Environment in 2007. His years of experience made it possible for one of LA's largest agencies to be fully functional and forward-thinking during the pandemic. Responsible for watershed protection, wastewater treatment, and collection of solid resources, LA Sanitation and Environment had to make some pretty dramatic changes when the virus hit the city. But fortunately, those changes were made, and here to explain what happened, Enrique Zaldivar. He is the Director and GM of LA Sanitation and Environment. So nice to have you here. Okay, I gotta start right off the bat with the show and tell. When LA Sanitation and Environment had to make adjustments to the departments, you put together something pretty special for your employees.
That's right. So, you know, as you said, Maria, much of our workforce needed to stay working.
Yes.
But the hand sanitizer became a critical item that we
couldn't find.
So we had the capacity to make it in-house.
We have seen recently a lot of the protests and multiple tens of thousands of people walking through the street of Los Angeles. How did that affect LA San?
Our job was to clean up following the demonstrations, whether it was litter, whether it was debris. Having a bunch of trash containers in the midst of the demonstration can always have a catch-22 because we certainly don't want the trash bins to themselves become something that could be set on fire or anything like that. So we would come in afterwards.
Are you feeling okay with how people are behaving in terms of keeping their environmental thoughts in their minds, even though we're kind of going back to a somewhat disposable world for a short time?
You know, Maria, that's a question that I had actually contemplated prior because keep in mind, our mission is to protect public health and the environment.
Right.
Well, those two usually are complementary, but there are times in which they may clash. I mean, you saw where stores, they were not requiring people bringing their reusable bags.
Right.
And giving away thicker plastic bags, and the governor relaxed the state requirement. We were fine with it because what became more important then is that folks needed to feel safer about their public health. So this is the one instance in which public health can trump environmental protection until we're able to get them to be complementary again.
There has been a huge increase in people utilizing wipes and utilizing things to keep their surfaces. And I had heard that there is now a problem with people flushing those that should not be flushed. Have you noticed issues with the wastewater treatment plant?
You know, it's interesting, Maria, how sort of what appear to be oftentimes the most basic of activities can cause such huge problems if we don't address them, but wipes is one of those.
Yeah.
They provide an incredible utility to the customers, to the residents, especially now, as you said. And then there's this problem of mislabeling where so many of the wipes are labeled as flushable.
Right.
Which, of course, we would go by what the label reads, and if it's flushable, it's flushable. Well, they're not. Many of them are not, if not most of them. And so over time, yes, it could be in someone's very own home. There's a clog, and before you know it, there's a backup.
Right.
And if it gets deeper into our system, then our pumping plants can get clogged up. And that's a major environmental issue with spills coming out onto the street. pipes backing up into people's basements, sometimes into people's living rooms. So the tiny, innocent-looking wipe can be quite the ravaging,
Right.
you know.
Well, you're responsible for the largest wastewater treatment plant in the country, so I imagine that once it gets into that arena too, we're talking about some pretty large challenges to make sure that the water gets treated properly and is purified once again.
Yes, and you know, anything that goes in will show up at our treatment plant, Hyperion Water Reclamation Plant, where we're very well on our way of making it the largest recycled water production facility in the world.
Wow.
That our goal, Mayor Garcetti's goal, is to do that by 2035. That's only 15 years away.
Yeah.
But it is certainly, in my view, a beautiful facility. It does have the best view in the city, by the way.
Does it really?
It looks straight out onto Santa Monica Bay. Water frontage, beautiful views. So, you know, all of our folks who work there, when I go there, I just feel so fortunate.
Oh, obviously, LA San is responsible for the city at large. So what are some of the efforts that have taken place to make sure the city's streets themselves are clean?
You know, litter can define, oftentimes, the image of a city.
Sure.
And we want to tackle it from the ground up. That is that, you know, folks enjoy drinking a cup of coffee while they're walking. Well, you know, how long before you have to find a place to get rid of the cup? If there are no places to get rid of the cup, you know, are folks going to continue to carry the cup?
No, they're going to toss it.
You would want to believe that they would, but that's not practical. So there's got to be places where folks can toss it. That's where we come in. So through Mayor Garcetti's leadership and the City Council, right now there are over 12,000 litter bins all throughout the city. And we're going to add more so that at some point there's almost like a saturation point, that you will never have to walk more than a block to find a place to get rid of it.
Right.
That eliminates the litter problem that can be so defining.
Right. It's surprising to me how much, I mean, kind of, you know, walking into just hearing about LA Sanitation, you sort of have this is what it does, it picks up the trash, it takes care of the water treatment, et cetera. But there's this enormous array of different services that your department provides that I don't think, you know, even fun things, and I know that a lot of things have to be taken into consideration with the COVID that you cannot do. But you had an Earth Day bingo to have an LA Sand truck come to a house. How did that go?
Well, very popular, by the way. And, you know, we have those little mini trucks.
Yes.
Which are adorable.
Sure, you can say that.
And they're an exact replica of our big size trucks, and they're really nice. And so, like on our Earth Day events, we give those away to the kids, and they are just popular as you can imagine. And so, yes, I think we're obviously here to serve and service the residents of the city, and we are an asset of the city. But I think we have to speak more about all the many things we do for the residents.
Right.
LA River is a great example. I mean, most folks don't know that during the dry years, the dry months of the year, there is a river because of the recycled water we put in the river. And now under our watershed program, as you indicated, Maria, being able to maintain and keep the water clean so that we can enable things like kayaking. And once you have done that,
you look at the river in a whole new way, I imagine.
Absolutely. It's a complete transformation.
Lighting fires on sacred shores. I found a spot just like before. A setting sun you can't ignore. In the darkness, find a cure. To the river, we run, holding tight.
Well, if people want to learn more about LA Sanitation and Environment, what's the website they should go to?
lacdsan.org.
Well, I thank you so much for telling me all this wonderful information and for sharing some time with me.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you.
LA's Medical Services Administrator and RN Joanne O'Brien is a strong proponent of wearing a mask to save lives. We sat down to discuss the science and logic behind face masks. Well, currently 1 in 140 people in Los Angeles get COVID, and the stats say that it might even go to 1 in 100 or 1 in 70 if we don't take some action pretty quickly. We're not in a good space right now, but in general, what's happening in Los Angeles?
Well, we've seen a surge in the number of positive cases and also a surge in hospitalization. So that's where we're starting to get concerned, and that's where we're sort of rolling back. We've heard our governor and our Mayor Garcetti talk about sort of the dimmer switch. And when we see this increase in cases, we want to kind of dial back because we don't want the infection to spread and then also impact the hospitals.
There's some very, very simple things that people can do, and obviously the most important part that has been determined is wearing a face covering. How do they help?
Face coverings, when you talk, when you're just normally talking, your nose and your mouth put out little droplets. We know that the virus is spread in those droplets. And just talking back and forth, I'm standing next to you, and if you have COVID and I don't have a mask on and the person talking to me doesn't have a mask on, I'm breathing that in.
Well, I have a whole bunch of masks here, and does any of it matter? Does it matter what they are? I've got, the disposable one that you see around a lot. I've got, a custom cloth one that was designed for me by a dear friend. I've got, a very basic cloth one. And then I've got one that's called a KN95. So does any of this matter?
They're all good. They're starting to do some studies. The cotton masks that have sort of more than one layer are the best. So that's actually the homemade ones with the layering.
Nice.
Is really, really effective. When you're taking your mask off, take it away because the front of your mask is considered to have the virus on it. It's infected. When you're done wearing your mask for the day, if it's cloth, you need to wash it. The KN95 is not the medical grade one, but
No.
it kind of has the same numbers. And those masks are a little more sturdy than the blue mask there, and you can actually put those in like a paper sack, put them over on the side, and then reuse them until they get wet or soiled.
I've seen a lot of people wearing their face covering and their mask, but sometimes they put them down below their nose. I'm sure that's for physical comfort, but are you completely eliminating all of the benefit of wearing a mask if you're not wearing a mask properly?
Pretty close to it.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking, you're breathing, and those same droplets come out of your nose, more out of your mouth. There's, you've mitigated or taken away some of the risk, but when you don't cover your nose and your mouth, it's not the proper way to wear a mask.
The idea of wearing a mask, a lot of cities now, or some cities I should say, are saying that you will be cited if you do not wear a mask outside. I thought inside was sort of required, outside because of just the nature of being in an outside environment, it's not as necessary. Where's the line where you should wear a mask?
The only place you should not wear a mask is your own home, when you're around your own family members. And when you walk outside of your house, put your mask on.
So out walking the dog.
Wear your mask.
Okay.
Yeah.
When should you give yourself a respite? Because they're not the most comfortable after a period of time. I mean, they're tolerable for a while when you're doing your grocery shopping, when you're walking your dog, etc. When should you, just from a health standpoint, because I know a lot of the resistance is, you're breathing your own exhale. That's not so good for you. You need to breathe in fresh air. When should you give yourself a little bit of a respite?
It's okay to have a mask on, and you're not going to hurt yourself by breathing in your own air.
CO2.
Right, it's okay. That's not a harm. I would be very honest with you, if you're doing vigorous exercise, it's going to be hard to wear a mask. And so like when I'm out in my neighborhood and I'm exercising, and I won't have it on, but if I see someone coming in the other direction, I'll put it on out of the courtesy for that person.
I know that there is a resistance from people who feel as if it's against their civil liberties, but then there's also the sort of laissez-faire idea of, well, I'm too young, I'm not going to get it, this is silly. You know, how do we combat that process? And I don't even know if there's an answer to this. You know, how are we getting the message across to those that are asymptomatic, to those that may not think that there's anything that's going to affect them? How do you get through to them?
I think with education, messaging, I think the more information you provide to people, they can make choices, but masks do work. They work.
I actually read that if 80% of the population wore a mask, it would be a lot more effective than these safer at home and lockdown
I actually
scenarios.
read that same information, and I would think it's true if you just sort of think it through. And there's lots of things on the internet that show, you know, when you're talking, how things sort of spray out and how much it is, and then how that changes when you put a mask on. It's remarkable. So if everyone did that, then the virus wouldn't have anywhere to go. It's having a blast right now. It's just looking for another host. So if you kind of knock it down, it'll go away.
What do you feel about the new acrylic face coverings that you're starting to see people wear?
The face shields really are used primarily in a medical setting, and those the virus still, don't have your face and mouth covered, and there's nothing precluding that virus from coming out or going in. You still need to have a face covering.
Really?
So, yeah.
Okay.
And we wear those in the medical world when we're doing something with a patient that may cause some spray. You're doing some kind of surgical procedure, or, you know, where there's a chance of something splashing on you. That's when you would wear that.
So it's the fact that they're open at the bottom
Right.
is
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
eliminating
Yeah.
their efficacy.
Right.
Interesting, because I've seen more people just at the store wearing those than I had a couple weeks ago. So, all right, well, now the cases are expanding exponentially, but once someone has been tested and they have actually been determined that they have it, now there's this whole issue of contact tracing. How is that working, and how is it going to help?
Public health has used this for a very long time. For example, with tuberculosis. Somebody comes down with a communicable infection, something that can spread to other people. You have to figure out where they have been and who they've been with. So when we're doing this contact tracing, we ask, for example, in the work setting, when was the last day you were at work? Who was near you? Did you have a face covering? Did everybody else have a face covering? What's going on at home? Where have you been? So you start to do this circle of who they were around immediate, longer than 15 minutes.
Okay,
Less
that's
than
the
6,
line?
Yep. The CDC has defined that as 15 minutes at least without a face covering. So, you know, you're at the bar talking with a friend, you're talking back, well, you're there for 2 hours. That's an exposure. So we have to isolate that person for 14 days.
Has there been any variance in that 14 days? The 2-week mark has been what we have learned from the very beginning. So we know if you're going to become ill, you will become ill in those 14
Within
days.
14 days.
Is there a
yes.
variance in there at all?
There absolutely is. A lot of people will start to feel symptoms on day 5.
Okay.
So you could test somebody on day 5 and know what's going on, and 60% of the time they'll be positive. But if you wait till day 11, you're going to go up to about 90% to see where they're at. If you haven't become positive within those 14 days, then you're going to be okay.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for all of your information. And if people want more information, that's an critical part of this whole thing. Where's the best source for people to get information, particularly here in Los Angeles and what's happening in the world?
The City of LA, if you just cityofla.org, it'll guide you to that. It'll go to the main page. I know the mayor's office has really done a really good job of keeping the information updated. The CDC, World Health Organizations. I would go to reputable organizations.
Thank you for all of this updated information. Hopefully, next time we talk, we'll be talking about all the positive strides the city has made.
Look forward to it.
In 2017, Councilmember Mitch led the movement to create Indigenous Peoples Day in Los Angeles. His resilient spirit has come in handy as Los Angeles faces some of its greatest challenges in decades. Pandemic, policies, parking, protests. It's just business as usual for our next guest, Mitch O'Farrell from Council District 13. I am obviously being incredibly facetious when I say that. It has been nothing but business as unusual. So let's begin with some of the current topics. Actually, in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protest, you and Councilmember Curran Price introduced a motion requesting a policy for renaming buildings, streets, and perhaps even removing art that may be deemed offensive by certain communities. What prompted that decision, and are you thinking of anything in particular, or was it just kind of in general looking for a plan?
So, first of all, thanks for having me on your show again, Maria. It's always a pleasure, even in these incredibly difficult times that everyone is facing. So in regard to the statues, back in 2017, I led the effort to replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. One of the consequences of that was to lobby the county to remove the Columbus statue in Grand Park. There is a process that exists in the county to remove controversial symbols for public display. And so Mr. Price and I co-introduced the motion so we could establish a process for the city, not unlike the process that the county already has.
When you say you're introducing a process, would that then offer an opportunity for people to voice their feelings and opinions, and perhaps might even argue against the removal of some of these things, and then a decision made by whom? Exactly.
So this way we have a complete, transparent public forum for these types of discussions. When we removed the Columbus statue in Grand Park, it involved the county art commission. It involved the commission, the Indian Native American commission, which is the county and city commission, and then it involved public hearings. So we don't have any such format for that. We want to make sure that we can proceed in a manner that is fair, open, transparent, and then addresses trauma and harm that these controversial symbols represent. Because symbolism is important. If we're to dismantle racism wherever it exists, that also means dismantling the symbols that are held in some form of reverence in the greater public sphere.
Last time we spoke, all of the Pride events were going to be virtual, and then there was a loosening of the restrictions, and so the parade actually happened. How was that for you?
It was great. I participated. I marched. I was there. It was a very meaningful, important, spiritually uplifting event, and it's so important that the Black LGBTQ community have a voice. With the original unrest back in 1969 at Stonewall, it was a Black trans woman who was one of the key leaders of the protest at Stonewall. So we have to keep, as a reminder that our movement was born of diversity, and now it's the continued diversity which also sort of teaches a lesson to the greater society that in the LGBTQ community, we really know how to work together.
Along with what's been going on, and our restrictions were loosened up a little bit, but unfortunately, there's somewhat of an increase in the COVID cases in Los Angeles, which means we need to sort of back up a little bit in order to be able to go forward in a positive way in the future. And one of those things that Newen wanted to make sure went forward was the mitigating the problem of people staying home and getting parking tickets. So you got that relaxed enforcement extended. Was that a big fight, a little fight, or was everybody right on board with you and understood it completely?
My team, my field team, they are so on their game. And over the weekend, when it was announced that DOT was going to put the parking enforcement back in full force on July 6th, they started getting calls. People were anxious about it. And right around that time, we were starting to roll back our reopening because of the COVID cases have been increasing severely. Bars were closed again. So I thought more people are going to stay home again. So we need an emergency extension of the lifting of the restrictions. And so that's what we're doing, and they'll be in place until the end of July. The last thing that people need is to get, an $82 parking ticket right now, especially if they're staying home and not able to work.
And there are some exceptions to that rule. I know that metered parking is still metered parking.
Right.
And you have to.
Red curb, et cetera. But this gives a great relief for the most part. It's something that we can do to at least give folks a little bit of a break, and they don't have to worry about a parking ticket.
A lot of people still are unable to go back to work. A lot of people are unable to pay their rent. So you are a strong proponent of the HEROES Act, because there are restrictions and limitations what can be done on a local level. You really need support from a national perspective.
We do. We've done so much to help renters who are living with the consequences of COVID, either because they're unemployed or partially employed now. There are state issues that supersede what we can do locally, so we need help from the state and the feds. The HEROES Act has in it a provision for $180 billion with a B for relief for renters, mortgage holders, and small businesses. And it's mostly smaller mom and pop and family-owned businesses that own most of the apartment buildings in Los Angeles. But guess what will happen if they go into foreclosure or file for bankruptcy? They'll get gobbled up by hedge funds and corporations. And then we'll lose that neighborhood touch. As cliche as it sounds, we literally are all in this together. It's time to put everything aside and give a relief, a bailout for everyday Americans. Not big corporations, but everyday people trying to stay housed and keep their mortgages sound.
You have been a proponent of, as far as mask wearing, education over enforcement. Now that was actually, a few weeks ago. How are you feeling? Are you still in education, or do you think we need to move into enforcement?
We may very well go into enforcement, but we also have to take a look at the realities. We must have all of our first responders always wearing a mask as well. I don't always see that. So we're going to have everyone wear masks. We certainly can't have someone enforcing someone wearing a mask in public if they themselves are not wearing a mask. So believe me, I take a look at those numbers every day as well. Everything's fluid, right? I also don't want unintended consequences. So it's not as easy as enforce or not. Where will you enforce? When will you enforce? But when it comes right down to it, if these cases keep climbing and we have to go in that direction, I'm going to be open to it.
How are you feeling about the future of theater?
I'm on a mission to make sure that our small theaters survive. We are helping our small theater community with arts funding that exists in our discretionary pot through the Cultural Affairs Department. I'm focused on keeping our small theaters alive through this, and we're working with them as closely as we possibly can. And then we're also inviting anyone, small theater companies, et cetera, to apply for my $1 million fund for small businesses. I've established another fund through discretionary priorities. It's a new world. We have to think creatively in new ways. And I want everyone to understand that my office is here to help, because we're all on this adventure that none of us intended on being on, but we're on it, and we've got to make the most of it somehow. And that's why I'm here.
And if someone wants to reach out and find out about what the office is doing and what the different opportunities are and what the different policies that are being put into place, what's the best way?
They can call 213-473-7013 or cd13.com and just contact us and learn about the programs that we're offering.
Well, I really appreciate all of this information. Hopefully next time we chat, it'll be because something is open, something is launched, and we're going to be celebrating something. But congratulations on keeping things alive and going well in your district.
Thanks, Maria. I appreciate that.